Hey everyone, and today I'll be doing my tips for round 2. Unfortunately round 1 wasn't a great week, it was a bit of a shocker, but let's hope I can do a bit better this week. I'll get straight into it. The first game we have is Richmond and St Kilda, the MCG, so you reckon the Saints will be very keen to make amends after losing to the Gold Coast last week. That was a bit of an upset for them. The Saints haven't lost the first 2 games of the season since 2000, so it's been quite a long time since they've had that issue. And last year I actually tipped this game right down to the point. I was pretty impressed with it actually, within saying that the Tigers broke a 9-year hoodoo against the Saints. St Kilda hadn't lost to Richmond since 2003, and well, the Tigers won by 8 points in the end, and Jack Rewell also kicked 8 goals, so he was quite a star on that night. I think Richmond will be too good, and I think they'll get home by 13 points. Sydney and Gold Coast. So Sydney have had a pretty easy draw. GWS first round and Gold Coast second round. It's been played at the SCG, so they'll get a chance to show off their premiership flag that they've won. Gold Coast have only managed 12 goals against Sydney in their 2 clashes they've played, and Sydney have won by 70 points and 72 points respectively. I think both those classes were at Metricon Stadium too, so home or away, Sydney don't mind Gold Coast. Whilst Gold Coast were fantastic against St Kilda last week, I think Sydney will be too good at home. Gold Coast have also never played the SCG before, and Sydney just have the best defence in the competition. You just cannot score against them. They're structured so well, and yeah, it's very tough to get a decent score, let alone beating them. So for this game, I'll tip the Swans to win by 44 points. We've got the Western Bulldogs against Fremantle at Etihad Stadium. This should be a pretty entertaining contest away from home. The Dockers did show, however, last year that they can win away from home. They played 3 games at Etihad Stadium, and surprisingly enough, they won them all under Ross Lyon, so you could probably say he was quite a contributing factor to that. It'll certainly be a great test for both sides to see where they're really at, and even though the Dockers had a good run at Etihad last year, they haven't beaten the Dogs, I think, outside of Western Australia since 2004, so they don't often get a win against the Doggies away from home, it seems. The Dogs haven't won the first 2 games of the season since 2009, so it's been a little while since that's happened. Hayden Ballantyne will also be out for the Dockers, so he plays a pretty good role up forward, and I remember he kicked 4 goals, I think it was, against the Kangaroos, and that really helped him to their 53-point victory against North last year, which was at Etihad. What gives the Bulldogs good chances? They've won 7 of the last 9 games against Fremantle, so they don't mind playing the Dockers, have a good record. But as I said, Fremantle have won their last 3 at Etihad Stadium, and I think that will work in their favour. So for this game, I think Fremantle will be able to get the 4 points. I think they'll win by 25 points. At the Gabba, we have Brisbane and Adelaide. This should be quite a fascinating contest, as both sides that were expected to deliver quite well in round 1 didn't really. So both sides will be keen as mustard to make amends. And remember in the game last year, in round 21, Adelaide were 38 points up at quarter time. They basically had the game in the bag, but Brisbane at home, they came back, fought back, and won the game, stole it from the Crows, and won in the end by 10 points. So that was quite a highlight for the Lions. And these 2 sides have played 35 times, and there's absolutely nothing separating them. 17 wins each, and they're probably also a draw that they played in. So real bragging rights for the winner of this game, for sure. If it was at AAMI Stadium, I'd tip the Crows, but it's at the Gabba, and Brisbane don't mind a win at the Gabba, so I think Brisbane will get home in the end and win by 4 points. GWS make a trip to Adelaide, and they play Port Adelaide at their home ground at AAMI Stadium. This should be interesting, even though you'd probably think Port Adelaide will surely beat the Giants. you can't forget that last year the Giants actually defeated Port at their home ground at Skoda Stadium, which was quite an upset really. And also, I think Port only won 3 of their 12 games at Amy Stadium last year, so at home wasn't really where it was at for Port. Going by Port's awesome form, they should surely beat the Giants, and especially considering that they are at home. It's a golden opportunity for Port to be on top of the ladder after round 2. They haven't done that since 2004. So yeah, if they get a decent win against the Giants and boost their percentage, they'll definitely be on top of the ladder after round 2, which will shock many AFL fans for sure. I think Port would be too experienced here. However, I think there's just the slightest chance that GWS can cause an upset. Although I'm going to tip Port to win this one by 50 points. Essendon and Melbourne's always an interesting contest. It's an absolute nightmare for tipsters because it seems that no matter what position these sides are on the ladder, Melbourne always seem to have the wood over the Bombers, and I think they have won the last 3 clashes against the Bombers, so that gives them quite an advantage. Last time they played, Essendon were on top of the ladder, and Melbourne were actually on the bottom of the ladder at that stage, but I think the wet conditions probably helped out, and Essendon were just a bit slacker than usual. The final margin was actually just a goal, so it wasn't an overall. It wasn't a shellacking in the end, but it was a mighty upset for the. I think Melbourne were $10 to 1, so they did a sensational job to get over the line. Although I think it's going to be tough for Melbourne this week. I think Mitch Clark is out, so that's going to make their forward line look a bit flatter than usual. I think Essendon should get the points on this one. I'm tipping them to win by 21 points. On the Sunday, we have Geelong and North Melbourne up against each other, and boy, this is going to be a cracking contest for sure. You can just tell based off the NAB Cup, where they played against each other at the Cats' home ground, Simmons Stadium, and final margin was only 12 points, so the Roos were very, very competitive for basically the whole match, and really gave the Cats a bit of a scare at home, which doesn't happen too often. Geelong have a great record at Etihad Stadium. They don't mind playing there. They've only lost, I think, 2 games since 2010. I think that was against North Melbourne in 2012 and Essendon in 2011. And we couldn't forget last year how North just ran the reigning premiers off their feet with their quick handball movement, and they won in the end by 16 points. And that's the first time they've beaten the Cats since round 5, 2007, so broke a 5-year drought. Long time between drinks of beating the Cats. Quite interesting too that in the round 5 clash in 2007 they won by 16 points, and the contest between these two sides last year, there was also 16 points of difference, so I don't mind beating the Cats by 16 points. Should be a ripping match. I don't really know who's going to win this one. It could go either way. I'm just going to go with Geelong by 18 points based off their good first week. We've also got Carlton up against Collingwood, and this is just about the most anticipated game, if not the most anticipated game of the season. The apprentice up against his old teacher, and Mickey Moldhouse coaching against the side he said he would never coach against. So a lot of controversy there, but he missed footy so much after having a year off and doing a bit of commentary on the side. And there's been a lot of build up to this match, so hopefully it should be a beauty. Form between these two sides tends not to matter. Carlton defeated Collingwood last year by 10 goals in the round 3 clash, and then later on in the year the Blues defeated them by 23 points, even when they were very far off their best, and Collingwood weren't going too bad at that stage. The idea that Mick Moldhouse is with the Blues now sways me to think Carlton will be able to get over the line against Collingwood. And also the fact that they've won the last 2 contests against the Pies puts them in a commanding position. This game kind of reminds me of when Bomber Thompson moved over to Essendon, and then the Cats played Essendon in halfway through the year, and Bomber knew his team inside and out, and he generally knew what to expect, and of course the Bombers caused a huge upset against the Cats, and I think maybe the same could happen here. Once again, this game could go either way. I think the Blues will be able to get home by 8 points. The last game of the round is West Coast and Hawthorn at Patterson Stadium. These two sides always put on a great contest, and it should top off a wonderful round of footy. It seems whenever these games are played at the MCG, the Hawks find a way, but whenever it's at Patterson Stadium, West Coast just find a way to sneak home. In their last two encounters, Hawthorn have beaten them once, that was by 25 points of round 23, and West Coast managed to beat the Hawks at home by just 5 points at Patterson Stadium early on in the year. Simply because it's at Patterson Stadium, I think West Coast will be able to get the win in this game. Only Sydney and Fremantle have beaten West Coast at Patterson Stadium since the start of 2011, so it's been pretty difficult to beat the Eagles at home. The Cats and the Hawks have given them a run for their money in recent times, though. I think both sides have lost by 5 points and 8 points against them in their last two clashes for both sides respectively. And with that stat in mind, and the fact that it's at home for West Coast, I think they should be able to get the win here against the Hawks. I think they'll win by 10 points. So those are my tips for round 2. Hopefully I'll do a bit better this week. It would be quite nice to get a few more tips right. In the comments, feel free to put your tips and whether you agree with mine or not. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys all soon.